choose record to, there we go. Thank you. Okay, so let me share my screen and we'll get started. So first, I just wanted to mention, some of you probably saw on Facebook that we have some sponsors for our workshop tonight. And because of that, we've been able to, if you stay to the end and provide us with your contact information, you'll receive a $50 gas card as well as a book. We have, I'm going to be talking about some of these books tonight, and so you'll be able to choose one that kind of sparks your interest. Although can't guarantee you'll definitely get your first choice, but we do have a bunch of these that we have at our office. So we're looking forward to connecting with you in that way. And so thank you to, I wanted to just mention our sponsors. First Five Kern sponsors a lot of our programs, especially our programs that are focused on families with young children from birth to 6 years old. And then California Family Resource Association is specifically sponsoring the gas card and the book. So we are just so happy to be working with them on that. So starting talking about the growth mindset, I don't know how many of you are already familiar with this concept, but it's almost easier to talk about what the growth mindset is by thinking about what the opposite is, the fixed mindset. So this term growth mindset was coined by Dr. Carol Dweck, who started researching this concept starting in the early 1970s. So she's got almost 50 years looking at this in various ways. And so the fixed mindset that she identified was a belief that intelligence is static, that it doesn't really change. You're kind of born one way, and that's your intelligence level and your level of talent. And so, for example, someone who says, you know, I'm not smart, I can't do anything right, they have a fixed mindset. You know, they think this is static, this is who I am, I'm not very smart. But alternatively, someone who says, I'm the smartest person in my class, that person also has the fixed mindset because they're kind of identifying this particular trait that as if it's just a static thing. So when you're in a fixed mindset, though, it leads to a desire to look smart and therefore a tendency to avoid challenges, to give up easily when obstacles arise. Whereas in contrast, a growth mindset is the belief that intelligence can be developed. You can change over time, you can get better at things, your talent is not fixed. And so that leads to a desire to learn and therefore a tendency to embrace challenges, to persist in the face of setbacks, because you think, you know, that's the way I'm going to get better is if I keep going. Oops. So as we kind of follow that thread down, people who are in a fixed mindset, they see effort as either fruitless or even worse than that, effort is a sign that you're not smart. If you have to work at it, then you're not naturally smart. And so that's a kind of threatening, feeling. They have a tendency to ignore useful negative feedback because it feels threatening. And they feel threatened by the success of others. With the growth mindset, by contrast, you see effort and hard work as the path to mastery and to getting better. You're more likely to learn from criticism and take it in and really try to think about it, and also find lessons and inspiration in the success of others rather than seeing that as a threat. And so it kind of leads to, the fixed mindset often can be early success, but people not necessarily achieving their full potential. Whereas in the growth mindset, you kind of keep growing because you're open to that. And so what I wanted to ask now is, can you think of an example of someone with a fixed mindset? Does anyone come to mind when you think of someone that you've observed, or maybe someone famous? Or I'd love to hear if anyone had any thoughts as we were talking about a fixed mindset and what that looks like.
I can think of an example.
Yeah, let's hear it.
So we have somebody who likes to cook, right? And they just follow recipes to a T, but they never try to expand and throw in their own ingredients or try to grow or try somebody else's suggestions. They just have to follow everything by the book, and that's just all they know, instead of trying to do the growth mindset where they're going to experiment and trial and error.
Mm-hmm. And risk like a recipe not working out and
and
falling
criticism.
short.
Yeah.
Great example. Yeah, did anyone have any other thoughts they wanted to share?
I was thinking the growth mindset would hopefully be somebody like our president, who wants to take risks and make changes and see things in a different manner to make things work. But are they stuck in the fixed mindset because of so much history put on their shoulders that they have to go by a certain way?
Yeah,
it's kind of an interesting dynamic for one person.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way to think about it. How do you see this manifest with, famous people that we're watching on a really big stage? Thank you for sharing those thoughts. So hopefully some of you are, I don't know if some of you are Calvin and Hobbes fans. Calvin is actually a really great example of the fixed mindset. He's kind of the fixed mindset in a nutshell in a lot of different instances. So in this first comic, he's coming over and he's seeing little Susie Durkins like doing her homework and reviewing material and trying to practice. And he's saying, "Oh, I used to think you were smart." So for someone in the fixed mindset, effort equals you're not smart if you're putting in this kind of effort. And of course, just what's the point of trying if you can't be a winner? So Calvin is, in my mind, we are a family that loves Calvin and Hobbes, and he's just a great example of that, and someone that, as my daughters like to read his work, that I kind of point that out, that element. So the on the other hand, with so I'd love to think then about who comes to your mind when you think about a growth mindset. Is there anyone that you can think of in your life that has a growth mindset? I love this this quote from Dr. Benjamin Barber. "I don't divide the world into the weak and the strong, or the successes and the failures. I divide the world into learners and non-learners." And I think just thinking of people in the growth mindset as learners is a really good way to conceptualize what the growth mindset is all about. Oh yeah, Mandy, jump in. Love to hear from you.
Well, I was just thinking, I like to think of myself as a person with a growth mindset, because I like to take in new information, and I like to learn from that and other people's experiences and that kind of stuff. And I think that's really important for all of us to do, to a certain extent, at least, Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that. And I hope that I demonstrate the growth mindset on some things too, but actually on the fixed mindset, I can think of specific instances where I was really in a fixed mindset. One thing that I think about, I took Spanish 101 like 3 times. I took it at like a community college program. I took it in high school, and I still don't really speak Spanish. And I realized that one of the things was I was really in a fixed mindset. It didn't come easily to me. It was difficult. And I thought, I guess I'm just not good at this. And I kind of gave up and just thought, I guess it's not good at this. I'm not good at it. So I think for most of us, we can probably think of times when we were in a growth mindset or we were in a fixed mindset. So thanks for sharing that, Mandy.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. I think I come from a family where we're a fixed, but I grew out of my comfort zone to become a growth mindset, because in my family, my dad always made it seem that it was never okay to buy a property. It was never okay to try and buy yourself a brand new car. It was okay to always settle for less and not spend money on kind of things, when in reality, it's a success to be able to own your own property. It's successful to be able to own your own car versus not being able to,
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
I have a growth mindset because I want to be better. I don't want to sit in the fixed mindset. Like I want to outgrow my and my family's history,
Yeah. I thank you so much for sharing that, Maria. I love that. Because yeah, that's part of what we're here to talk about tonight is no matter what messages we got and how we were programmed, we can think about ways to give our kids different messages. So speaking of that, here's my example of who I think are the perfect example of those in the growth mindset. Toddlers. I think that they so exhibit a growth mindset. So I have two girls for those who don't know me. I have a 4-year-old and I have a 12-year-old, but these are pictures of two different kids. But if you look at these pictures of toddlers, they're trying new things constantly. They're trying to push boundaries constantly. They're climbing on a step stool and you didn't even think they were capable of doing that yet. And they're pushing themselves to try to do that. Or I look at my youngest, little Beckett over here. She was just determined to get something out of that drawer, no matter what it took. And she's not going to accept, they're willing to try new things. I mean, up here, my older daughter, like licking a snowman, it could be painful. It could look silly. They don't care. They're just willing to try pretty much anything. And in that process, they're learning. And even when they have setbacks, they just keep pushing themselves until they can accomplish. And I don't know if everyone's toddlers have as much of a stubborn streak as mine do, but they were definitely persistent in whatever they were trying to do. They're not going to give up easily. And I think toddlers really are just a perfect example for us, and something to realize that it's really something that's innate in children, and our culture kind of starts to whittle away at that a little bit. They start to notice, like, how do I look and how are other people perceiving me? And that's part of what holds, I think, adults, and as we get older, it holds us back from doing certain things because we're worried about appearances. We're worried about how will we look if we fail. But toddlers, they don't really care. They're just gonna go for it. So I think that in the fixed mindset, you can kind of end up making choices that short circuit your own growth and development in order to maintain image instead. And but all of this research into the fixed and growth mindset would be not nearly as interesting to me if we didn't have signs that we can actually change people's mindset. So Dr. Dweck, like I said, she's been studying this since the 1970s. So for many years, and in experiments and in lots of studies, she's shown that by giving certain types of feedback and praise, we can induce a growth mindset, at least temporarily, in people. And over time, through repeated teaching and patterns, we can help kids to develop a growth mindset. So that's what I wanted to talk about next, is kind of specific ways to praise for growth. So you can see here, there's a lot of times praise kind of gets broken down into two categories. So person praise is focused on inherent qualities, whereas process praise is focused on actions and choices that kids are making. So person praise, for example, you're so smart, whereas process praise would be, you worked really hard at that. It's not necessarily about something inherent like smartness or not being smart. You're a natural, I love that, versus you're a learner, I love that. So emphasizing that learning element, not necessarily that's an inherent thing that they can do. Again, great job, you're so talented, versus flipping that a little bit to, that's great. What could you do next time to go even further with it? Or you're such a good boy or girl. And instead focusing on their choices. I like the way you chose to, and finding something specific that they did in that effort. So so kind of the main takeaway from these different types of praising is that we want to praise things that are within a child's control, something that they can actually work on or do versus something that might be inherent to them. And in studies, they've found that kids actually get a lot more person praise than they get process praise. So, you know, I mean, I'm sure most of you can see the truth in that, where we say to kids, you know, you're so smart, or you're so cute, or you're so talented. And these are all person praise that they may not have direct control over. And that's kind of the drawback to that type of praise. So, so one of the things that would be really beneficial is to kind of take smart out of our parenting vocabulary a little bit, because if we think about it, if we think about that concept of what, you know, what can kids control, they really don't have any way to control how smart they are, right? We can't say just be smarter and they're going to be able to be smarter. And so, so really moving away from smart is well, you know, a smart thing to do. Because what we really want to focus on rather is the different strategies or actions that they can do to get better at things. And in one of Dr. Dweck's studies, so they had this experiment, and they gave one group of students, they told them they were smart right before they asked them to take a test, a hard test. And the other group of students, they had praised for their effort. And the students who were told that they were smart were less likely to say that they would take the hard test. And they were also more likely to lie about scores that they had gotten, as well as to cheat on the test. So she really saw firsthand how just using that word smart created these negative consequences for those kids versus those who were praised for effort. And so results like these have led some people to kind of say that the only thing worse than telling your kid they're smart is telling them they're dumb. Of course, we never want to tell a kid that they're dumb, but it's also not a great idea to tell them they're smart. But I have to say, you know, this is kind of hard though, right? Because, you know, haven't most of us as parents kind of felt the urge to praise our kid from a very early age, like, oh, you're so smart, or so I'm curious, you know, what do you guys think about this idea? Does this seem like something that is pretty difficult to do in practice, or is this something that that you've been aware of, or it kind of makes sense to you?
So what you're saying, it's wrong to say that they're smart? I'm confused.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is, like, her research showed that actually praising kids for being smart led to a lot of kind of negative consequences for the kids. They were less likely to take on hard challenges. They were cared more about how they looked and being perceived as smart. And so they were worried, if I take this hard test, then maybe I won't look smart anymore. And that praise that I just got will kind of go away, and they'll know that I'm not actually smart. And so what she found was more successful was praising the efforts that the kids put in, praising hard work, praising problem solving strategies that they use, praising persistence, things like that, rather than a person oriented praise like you're so smart or you're so talented.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, does that make more sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. So I see your comment, Chrissy, about you know, you praising your kids that they can get smarter if they can keep trying and not give up. So yeah, that's great that you're letting them know, you know, not staying in a fixed mindset, but saying you can keep getting smarter as you keep practicing and trying. So that's great. Thanks for sharing that. So going on to you know, when and how praise is most effective. So praise is most effective, again, when it's about something that is within a person's control. We already touched on that. When it's specific, when it's sincere, when it's coupled with constructive criticism. Now, for those, I think a lot of you have young kids, but for those who have teenagers, this gets super important in the teenage years. So one interesting study that Carol Dweck did, she looked at teenagers in particular, and teenagers are at that stage where they're really skeptical of authority. They're really skeptical of what people tell them, right? And so they're on the lookout for people who are just blowing smoke, right? People who aren't being sincere. And so one of the things that she found is that teens discounted praise to such an extent that they believed that it was teachers' criticism of them that really showed a belief in the student's aptitude. That kids who just got praise, that meant the teacher didn't even think they were capable of anything more. So I think that's really important to realize, especially as our kids get older, that they're looking for that constructive criticism because they are looking to see that you really, you're really watching them, you're really noticing, and you're really caring. And then finally, praise is most effective when it's in moderation. Excessive praise, they've done specific studies on excessive praise as well, and they've found that it leads to risk aversion. So that means like you're less willing to try hard things, you're less willing to take risks. It leads to less autonomy, less feelings of like empowerment for kids, more competition and competitive feelings, and even lying and cheating. Like I said, some of those studies, they found that kids who were praised excessively were more likely to lie or cheat in order to just maintain what they felt was that status that they got. So now process praise, on the other hand, that type of praise that we're talking about, where it's about their specific actions and choices, that has been shown to lead to greater persistence, so sticking with things longer, greater ability to cope with difficult experiences, greater openness to taking on challenges, more positive attitudes about challenges, greater ability to find problem-solving strategies and to act on those. And when kids get process praise, they're more likely to believe that you can improve intelligence through hard work. So that's the growth mindset right there, is that it's this circular thing. As they get process praise, then they're more likely to be invested in the growth mindset and believe that. So I kind of geek out about some studies in this area. So I wanted to share one that I found really interesting. So this was a study that they did with fifth graders in China and in the United States. And the design of this study was that they were going to have these fifth graders take a hard test, and the test was really too hard for them. So all the kids failed. And then they gave the parents, these Chinese parents and these American parents, 5 minutes to talk with their kid. And then the kids had to take a second hard test. And the kids and the parents thought that what they were measuring was actually the test, but in reality, what they were really looking at was that 5 minutes. And they were looking at both what they did physically, any physical contact between the parents and their kids, as well as what they said verbally. And so in terms of physical touch, there were no differences between the Chinese and American parents. So both Chinese and American parents were physically affectionate. They were hugging their children. They were smiling at them. They were kind of giving them warm and supportive touch. But what really differed was their language. So the Chinese parents, you can see they were really focused on something completely different than the American parents. So the Chinese parents were asking things like, did you concentrate while taking the test? You didn't concentrate. Let's look over your test together. And they looked over the test. They discussed the importance of the test and with their child. And again, they used firm words, but the whole time they were smiling and hugging their children and giving them that like physical warm support. The American parents, on the other hand, they really avoided making negative comments. They tried to stay positive and upbeat. They said things like, you'll do better next time. And they didn't discuss the kids' mistakes at all. And they also they gravitated towards talking about some other topic in that 5 minutes than the test. So they talked about like dinner. They would say things like, oh, we're going to take you out for dinner afterwards. Where do you want to go? So what was interesting to the researchers was that kind of paradoxically, the American parents, their intent was probably not to make their kid feel worse about having failed the test, but it may have communicated the message that failure is too terrible to even discuss, that we're not even going to talk about it. And so really, when they kind of looked at the differences between these Chinese parents and American parents, ultimately the Chinese parents were more focused on process. They were more focused on the process and helping their kids think about what the process of how they could improve and how they could do better on the next test. So now, what did that lead to? What happened then when they gave that second test right after that 5-minute period is that the Chinese students' scores went up 33% on the second test. So more than double the improvement of the American children. So this was really a successful approach that the Chinese parents had, where they were giving them warm support in terms of their body language, but they were also talking to them about strategies, and they were exploring their mistakes and trying to help them understand how to do better. So, so the next thing that I again, like I told you, I'm going to talk about just a couple of studies that I kind of geek out about. This is another one that I really, really enjoy. So based on what we're talking about tonight, I wanted to, this is a study that I love, where they took some students that were struggling in school. They were low performing students, and they assigned some of them to have one type of workshop, and others to have another type of workshop. And after just 50-minute workshop, one topic, one idea changed those struggling students' scores significantly. So my question is, does anyone have any guesses? Like, what would that one idea be that would have that much power to change after just one 50-minute session, that it could shift their grades so much? Any ideas? I see some faces thinking, I see thinking faces, so. All right, well, I won't keep you.
Maybe some real inspiration for them.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was part of what they were trying to get at, was what would be inspiring for kids, what would be motivating for kids. So what they ended up doing is they did one workshop that was on study skills, and the other workshop was on this other concept. And it turned out that the study skills workshop, it didn't really do much. It did not improve their scores. But this workshop on neuroplasticity did improve their scores. And so what they were learning, that word neuroplasticity, that's a really big word for a pretty basic concept, which is that our brains keep growing and keep changing. So and that sounds like a basic concept, I think, to some of us, but actually for years and years, until not that long ago, scientists believed that the brain really didn't grow very much after the early years of life. So it was kind of a new thing to realize that the brain, even though it's an organ, it works like a muscle, and it can keep getting stronger. And now we know that the brain is actually malleable and can change throughout your whole life. There's no age at which the brain can stop growing and changing and getting stronger. So I have taught this example to a group of kids before, and they actually really love it. This is one of the studies that helped us understand how much the brain can continue to grow and change. So what they did, these researchers took people who had had a stroke, and their strokes were severe enough that they'd actually lost the use of one arm. So they only had one arm that worked, and one arm was now paralyzed. And this sounds kind of mean what they did, but So what I'll tell you next, it sounds kind of mean, but their goal was to learn something very profound, which is what they learned. They actually tied their working arm behind their back, and then they told them to wipe down a table. So they had like a rag there, and they set them at a table. They tied their working arm behind their back and said, wipe down the table. And all they had was their arms that were now the side of their body that was paralyzed. And so over time, as they did that, and of course, these research subjects agreed to this experiment, right? But over time, what they found is that they did regain function in that arm, that their brain, when they scanned their brains, the brain, now there was a part of their brain that had experienced brain death. That part that died never came back online, but their brain found a new pathway in order to start moving their arm again. So that was just one of many experiments that kind of blew open this understanding that the brain actually grows and changes and is capable of doing that all throughout our life, even with these elderly stroke victims. Now kids actually, when I taught that to a group of like 8 or 9-year-olds, they loved that story. They were kind of fascinated about the brain in general, but they were especially fascinated about a group of people tying someone's arm behind their back. So this is an example of why teaching about neuroplasticity can be really effective with kids, because they are kind of inherently fascinated by learning about how the brain works and what it's capable of. So on that note, I wanted to jump in and share about some books that I love that are a way to teach your kids about these concepts and work with them on this. So, I don't know about you, but these last couple of years with a 4-year-old and a 12-year-old, they've been really challenging. And, a lot of days I am not on my parenting A game, right? I'm tired. I feel like I'm working too hard. I'm stressed out. My kids definitely watch a lot of screen time. That's just where I'm at. But this is one of the reasons why I love having some books and media on hand that will support the concepts that I think are important when I'm kind of tired and too tired to really be at the top of my parenting game. So this is one of my favorites, Your Fantastic Elastic Brain. And this book is basically all about teaching kids how their brain works. What are the parts of their brain? How does their brain help them, do different things? And there's some, once I read this book to even my 4-year-old, then I can kind of go back to that language from them and help reinforce it. So when she's doing something that's kind of hard for her and she hasn't quite got it, I'll say, you're literally growing your brain, remember? You're literally growing your brain right now. Or that's your fantastic elastic brain working. Look at how amazing it is. It's trying so hard to do this thing that's difficult. Here's another one that I love, Rosie Revere, Engineer. And this is about a little girl who is trying to invent things. She just wants to be an inventor. She's trying all sorts of things and she's failing every single time. It's not working. But her aunt kind of comes on the scene and tells her, that was the perfect first try. That was your perfect first failure. And so I love this book, reading this with my kids and then pairing it with trying to encourage them to, if something doesn't work, that was your perfect first try. That was your perfect first failure. Now try again. What could you do differently to try again? Right here, I wanted to talk about failure and using that word with our kids. That's kind of a scary word that we sometimes try to avoid. Now, of course, we never want to use it to describe our kids. We don't tell kids that they're a failure, but it's definitely something that is helpful to demystify that idea of failure, to say, that particular attempt or that, what you were trying to accomplish, like Rosie Revere, her first inventions breaking, that may have been a failure, but she kept trying. And so this is a quote by Samuel Beckett, but I love that, you know, try again, fail better. I think that making sure that our kids know that failure is not a scary word, that we will all experience failures in our lives. We will all fail at times, and it doesn't diminish our worth is so important to prepare them for those times when they will fail. Now, The Magical Yet. So this is another book that, you know, a lot of times our kids say, you know, I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't do that. And adding on that yet. So you can't do it yet, but you can keep working at it. And just being able to remind my daughters, you know, what's the magical word? It's yet. You can't do it yet, but you'll get there. And again, these are just ways that by having these books on hand and being able to, or I check them out from the library every once in a while when I see my kids, I have a few of these on hand, but when I see my kids struggling in a certain area, I'll just go to the Kern County Library, check out all the books on that, you know, on the growth mindset and go back and we'll reread them just to refresh. And this way that in the course of our normal days, I can refer back to some of these concepts and remind them of what we're learning from it. So this is another one. This is, you know, grit is all about persistence. So we've been talking a lot about the growth mindset. Grit is a concept that's very closely related. And it's the idea of combining your interest and passion for things with persistence and hard work. And so this book that I've read with my kids, it's about historical figures and the way they've persisted over time. And so then when I'm on, like, when, you know, my husband's hiking with our daughter and she says, I can't do it, I'm too tired, can you carry me? You know, he can say, hey, she persisted, can you persist in the situation? Can you keep going? And using that language of persistence. Now, this is one of my favorites because both of my kids love doing art. And this book, Beautiful Oops, is all about how our art, you know, sometimes we're doing a drawing and we care a lot about it, but it gets crinkled or ripped or we mess up. I don't know if anyone else has that experience with their kids where they get real upset sometimes if they have a vision in their head and then something doesn't go right and they're kind of upset about it. But so just yesterday, my daughter actually brought me this rainbow that she had been coloring, but it got water splashed on it. And I looked at it and I said, that looks like a beautiful oops to me. I think it looks beautiful. And she said, yeah, I think it is a beautiful oops. I think so. And so giving her that language to not just be upset about it, but to say, that turned into a beautiful oops. It wasn't what I wanted, but I see the beauty in it, has been really beneficial. Now, this is one of the movies that I really like. My girls have, like, I think so many girls have gone through major princess phases where they just are obsessed with princesses. And so I always like to have them watch some of the princesses that are the hardworking princesses. And you can see in the corner, this was actually my older daughter's whiteboard that I used to write. It takes hard work to live happily ever after, because I was worried about her getting the message. Now, I wanted her to keep watching princess movies because they entertained her and I needed a break. But I was worried about her thinking that life is all sort of rosy like that. And so I would write that on her whiteboard every once in a while. And so when she was doing something, I would say, you know, if she wanted to give up, what if you worked as hard at that as Tiana does? You know, can you keep going? Like, look at how Tiana worked so hard. Or, you know, just reminding her, she's the hardest working princess around. Are you going to be a hardworking princess? And it kind of helped to reinforce that. Now, I mentioned the book Grit. So Grit is a related concept to the growth mindset, but it's a different psychologist named Dr. Angela Duckworth wrote the book Grit. And one of the concepts from the book Grit again is all about persistence and one of the key concepts that she has and that they use in their family is called the hard thing rule. And I love this hard thing rule. It has 3 parts in their family. So the first thing is that everyone has a hard thing. Everyone, has to be doing something that's hard that shows some persistence. And that includes the parents, that includes the kids. Everyone has their hard thing. You stick with your hard thing. So you can't quit in the middle of it. So, for example, you sign up for a season of soccer. And if you're like my daughter, 3 days into it, she was like, this is too hard. I don't want to run. I just want to sit on the grass and make mud pies. We said, hey, you signed up for the soccer season. You're going to finish out the soccer season. So you can't quit in the middle of it. You have to wait until you finish whatever is your commitment, whether it's a school year or a season. And the third component is that each person gets to choose their own hard thing. Because in order for kids to be gritty, to keep persisting, they have to have some inherent interest in the whatever the activity is or the topic is. So parents can't make their kids gritty about something that kids are inherently uninterested in. And I've kind of discovered this as it's been my dream that my daughter would learn to play the piano, because I kind of regret that I never learned. But it turns out it's not her dream, and she really doesn't want to play the piano. And so that's part of, letting kids pick their own hard thing. And I wanted it to be piano, but it's not. And but at the same time, we have constraints, right? So her hard thing, if she had her way, it would be horseback riding. But that is way out of the budget. Horseback riding is a very expensive endeavor. So obviously kids get to choose their hard thing, but within, parameters that work for the family. So my daughter won't be realizing her horseback riding dreams, but even on a budget, there's ways to implement this hard thing rule. For example, some art supplies, if your kid is interested in art, some art supplies are pretty reasonably priced, and there's all these tutorials on YouTube. So you don't even necessarily have to, have a teacher or pay for lessons to be able to have them learn. We were actually gifted a ukulele, and so my daughter is learning the ukulele through YouTube lessons. So we'll see if this sticks more than piano. She just was fighting me on piano. So giving kids the opportunity to choose, though, is because you can't make someone gritty about something that they're just not interested in. So I wanted to pause there. We're kind of concluding here shortly, but I'm curious if others have found books or music or movies that help you teach grit and growth mindset with your kids, because I'm always on the lookout for new. Oh yeah, I saw Angela's comment, YouTube University. Absolutely. I love it. There's everything on YouTube. So does anyone have anything that they use with their kids, or a movie that now that you're thinking about it, you're like, hey, that actually teaches the growth mindset to kids?
I do, Lindsay. For my daughter, it's Chip and Potato. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. For my daughter, it's Chip and Potato. It's a show on Netflix. And it teaches kids about how they have to go to school and how it's okay to have an accident, and like it's just like little lessons that gives toddlers. Yeah. It's a toddler show. It's little lessons gives toddlers, like it's about puppies, which I don't understand why it's called Chip and Potato, but but I like it. I recommend it a lot. It's say the puppy has an accident and like he cries about it because he acts like a human being, although he's a dog, which you all moms probably understand that. But since I'm a first-time mom, to me that's still a little new. It's like, why does the dog talk? Why does the dog go to school? But okay. Anyways, and it teaches about how to make friends and how to not hurt other kids' feelings. And I like it. I recommend that one a lot. It's very similar to the books that you're talking about.
Yeah, I think my daughter, my 4-year-old, has actually looked at Chip and Potato too. So, and I was confused about the title too. I was like, I wonder where that came from.
Why? Yeah, because Chip and potato. Potato is the rat, which is a mouse. But
Yeah.
it shows unconditional love and respect, and I like it.
Great. Well, thanks for sharing that, Maria. Yeah, Katie, did you have something you wanted to share? Let's see. It looks like maybe you're trying to unmute, Katie. Chelsea, you can actually scroll over her and press like ask to unmute, and it might. Oh, there we go. There we go.
Sorry. I've never used Zoom before.
Yeah.
So I always liked Caillou
Hmm.
because they don't do anything necessarily. There's not always a problem in the storyline.
Yeah.
So I just think it's important for kids to know that not every day is going to be something that is so great and so different than, there are days where you just stay at home and
Yeah.
because mom has to do something and there's just not something exciting happening every single day. And to
Okay.
get comfortable with the routine of being at home and being able to settle in that, even if
Yeah.
there's no school, and there are disappointments in that show also. So I
That's
always
great.
I always put Caillou on.
Yeah, I've actually never watched Caillou. Somehow my kids kind of missed that one. So yeah, that's good to know. Yeah, not every day is, dealing with disappointments. That's part of what it's about, is like not giving up just because you face disappointments. So thanks for sharing that. And I
you're
like
welcome.
Charlie's comment too, about video games, that video games have helped her son who hated reading to find an interest, to kind of move forward with that. And nowadays there's opportunities for coding. Even the elementary school is having like a coding program. And so video game interests can really segue into a lot of different areas. So thanks for bringing that up, Charlie. And Mandy, you'd like to jump on and share an idea?
Yeah, it was actually about what Charlie wrote also, the video game thing. Because there's lots of things that I do with my son to encourage the growth mindset for sure. But with him, video games does help, because he's learning to not give up so easily, to not like get so frustrated so easily, learning from his mistakes, that kind of stuff. He's not quite old enough to be like full on reading and stuff like that, but I definitely agreed with that. So I wanted to mention it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I do think it's true. My daughter loves to play certain video games. I don't speak that language. I don't really understand what she's playing, but I always hear my husband telling her like, hey, you've just got to get experience with that. You just got to try it, and you might die this time, but next time maybe you'll get it. So yeah,
Yep.
I think video games can be something that shows that. Great. Well, thank you guys for sharing some of those things. Sorry, my thing is popping up. So the kind of where I wanted to end with this, as we're looking at these other shows and other stories and other worlds that support the growth mindset, don't forget to tell them your stories too. So keep in mind that, so this was a recent study that just was done in 2021, and they gave students of all different ages both struggle stories, so stories that were about like people who were really facing struggles and setbacks and that sort of thing, and also achievement stories that were really more, they had some setbacks, but it was more focused on their achievement. And the struggle stories were more successful at fostering the growth mindset. And along with not like telling them our stories, think about telling them their own stories too. If you have a memory of one of your kids as as a toddler really persisting on something, or the story of them learning to walk, or learning to crawl. If your kids are anything like mine, they love to hear stories about themselves. And it's a great way to show them that they have exhibited the growth mindset inherently in their life. And so this is one of the things that I like to do, especially with my older daughter. I mentioned about Spanish and taking Spanish 101 multiple times, and still I don't speak Spanish. And again, I can tell my daughter that I always viewed it from this fixed mindset, that it was just something that I wasn't good at. I wasn't good at learning a second language. I couldn't do it. But that how I was able to realize that what it really boiled down to was I didn't practice enough because I was worried that people would think that I wasn't smart enough, that I couldn't do it, and that I was making a lot of mistakes. And so I failed because I just wouldn't put myself out there enough to really try. And, would it have been better, and I asked my daughter this, would it have been better for me to fail at speaking to someone and trying, and them to, kind of laugh at my Spanish, which anyone I ever practiced with was so gracious. They appreciated the fact that I was trying to learn their language, even though I wasn't very good at it, versus what ended up happening is I kind of failed at it just for lack of trying. And so, so definitely being willing to tell those stories, our kids need to hear those stories from us, that we failed or made a mistake, but it didn't make us a failure. And life went on, and we kept going and trying other things. And that's what models for them the growth that we know our kids are capable of. So, so that's why I wanted to end that topic. And I just kind of wanted to take a minute to share, for those who don't know as much about the MCFRC Family Success Coaching Program. This, again, is our program that is sponsored by First 5 Kern and focused on helping the youngest in our community get a great start to life. And it entails a lot of different things because it's very personalized. It's personalized to the family and what they need and what their priorities are, and supporting them in their goals, as well as, getting them access to resources, diapers, wipes, other supplies, food, things that they might need to help. And, but it really is, focused on what does the family need and what can we do to support that growth. So this, this topic of the growth mindset is, again, the type of thing that we want to talk about with our families that are in our Family Success Coaching Program. We want to just try to help give them tools and encouragement for giving our kids the best start in life. So if that's something that you are interested in, just reach out to us, and we're happy to help get you hooked up with that. Now, finally, I just wanted to thank you all for joining us. So remember to put your name, your phone number, or email address in the chat so that we can reach out to you and get you scheduled to pick up your gas card and book. Thank you again so much for coming, everyone. It's just been wonderful to talk with you and hear your ideas. And I'm sometimes grumpy about my daughter playing video games, so this was a good reminder to me that video games can really grow the growth mindset too. So just really appreciated all your comments, and so happy to have you guys here tonight.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Maria.
Thank you.
Thanks, Aubrey. It's good to see you. And your cute little one.
Yeah, she's getting big.
Yes, he is. He really is.
Growing every day.
Well, thank you again, everyone, for coming. It was so good to see everyone.